Hey guys, personal injury lawyer Scott DeSalvo here, and today I want to talk to you about what do you need to know, what information should you collect so that you've got it if you're calling a lawyer about a medical malpractice case. In other words, let's say you are calling somebody, calling a medical malpractice lawyer, but on behalf of somebody else. So your brother or your cousin or your husband or wife or your parents or your, God forbid, your child was the victim of medical malpractice, or you suspect, and you're going to call on their behalf. What information do you need? Well, I had, it started with an email. Somebody sent me an email, and then I spoke with a gentleman who wanted to call regarding a medical malpractice case regarding his brother. And the problem is, he didn't really have any of the information. He didn't know what he thought the doctors did wrong. He didn't know exactly when it was that the doctors did the thing that was wrong. He didn't, know a lot of the details about the medical care or treatment, and it made the case really hard for me to evaluate or provide any useful information. So that's why I decided to shoot you this video. So if you're calling regarding a medical malpractice situation, here are the things you need to know before you call the lawyer. I mean, of course, you can always call a lawyer, but with at least this basic information, they're going to be able to give you feedback like important deadlines in your case and sort of like what, whether it's a good case or what the case might be worth. So here's the first thing: the date or approximate date of the doctor's mistake, right? So in medical malpractice cases, you get 2 years from the date of the doctor's mistake to file a claim. So it could be a hospital or a nurse or another medical practitioner. I just say doctor's mistake for shorthand. But what did they do wrong and when did they do it wrong, okay? So the date or approximate date is important because you have 2 years to file a claim. And if you miss that deadline, then you're out of luck. You can't file a claim after that. And the reason it's so important is there's a lot of investigation that needs to be done on medical malpractice cases. So we've got to get all the medical records. We might have to get old medical records if you've got a complex medical history, right? So my point is it can be quite difficult to assemble all that information if you wait to talk to a lawyer right right near the 2 year deadline. So the second thing you need to know is you need to have some idea of what it is you think the doctor did wrong, right? Um, they can find that out by talking to their loved one or getting their loved one's medical records, or even just sitting down and thinking about it. Like, okay, there was a bad outcome for your loved one, but what is it specifically that you think the doctor or hospital did wrong? Lawyers who do personal injury, but especially lawyers who do a lot of medical malpractice, actually know a fair amount about medicine as it pertains to whether the courts allow a medical malpractice case to go forward based on a decision by a doctor. Okay? So it might be that you or your family member suspect that there's malpractice, but it turns out that the courts have looked at those situations and have decided that it's not actually malpractice. It may not be best practice, but it's not medical malpractice. And a lawyer will be able to tell you that if you can tell the lawyer the exact circumstances and exactly what happened and exactly what you think the doctor or doctors did wrong. Okay? The third big thing I want to tell you is, medical malpractice cases are quite expensive because before we even file a lawsuit, we need to have a medical expert for every specialty that is pertinent to your case. So in some cases, it's just a surgeon, but sometimes we're alleging that the surgeon screwed up, the anesthesiologist screwed up, and the nurses screwed up. That's three experts. And in cases like that, you can easily hit high five figures or six figures in case costs before you even file a lawsuit. So because the costs and the amount of work and effort medical malpractice cases require, we need to have some idea of what the outcome is, right? In other words, was it a real big scare, or is there really a huge life-changing consequence to the bad medical care, right? So here's the analogy I use. Um, let's say we're crossing the street on a green light and a car runs the red light and runs into me and breaks both of my legs. Well, that's a really good case because it's clear what the other side did was wrong. I was doing what I was supposed to be doing, crossing on a green in the crosswalk, and then the case is big enough to justify us spending quite a bit of resources to win the case, right? Because I had two broken legs, okay? So same fact scenario, I'm crossing the street on a green light in the crosswalk, and another car comes and runs the red light and almost runs into me, but scares the crap out of me. And I'm furious. Oh my God, that driver, somebody should take his license. He almost killed me. All of that is true. The problem is he didn't actually hurt me. He didn't actually kill me. Or maybe his rear view mirror on the passenger side of his car hit my arm and gave me a good bruise. But 3 weeks later, the bruise was mostly healed, and I got a minimum of medical care as a result of it. Same situation. The injury and the consequence of the bad action is so small that it wouldn't make sense for us to invest a ton of time and money into a case like that because the injuries are just not big enough. That means, cases settle based on how big the injury is. The bigger the injury, the more money the case is worth, right? And that makes sense. A broken leg might be worth 5 figures or 6 figures if a person can't walk, or even higher. But a bumper bruise is going to be worth a small amount of money, right? And so that's why in medical malpractice cases, we need to have some idea of what the outcome is for the person who's the victim of the medical malpractice. And I don't want you to get me wrong here. If a doctor makes a mistake, that is a terrible thing, whether they actually cause you a devastating injury or whether it's not, whether they don't hurt you that bad or don't hurt you at all. It's still horrible if a doctor is doing something obviously wrong. The problem is, though, that with a horrible decision by a doctor that doesn't create a horrible wrong, what can we expect to get at trial? $1,000? $10,000? Well, the problem is, if it costs me $50,000 to get the expert witnesses we need to prove the case, we go to trial, we litigate the case for 3 or 4 years, finally go to trial, and the jury gives us $10,000, we're now $40,000 in debt, right? So that's the point. And that's why all lawyers you talk to are always going to want to know what is the outcome. In this case, where I spoke to the gentleman's brother is okay. And so, he called on behalf of his brother. His brother doesn't even really want to do a case. It's more of like an outrage decision than it is a valid personal injury case because the injuries just aren't there. The last thing I'll say is that I sort of foreshadowed it or told you, jumped the gun a little bit. Does the loved one you're calling about want to do a case? So if it's a child and it's your child, obviously you can bring a claim on behalf of your child. But if it's your parent or your spouse or your sibling, and they're still around and they're able to talk to you and they tell you, no, I don't want to do a case, well, talking to a lawyer isn't really going to help you. And the other thing to think about is if, God forbid, somebody passes away, there are only certain people who can bring the lawsuit on behalf of the deceased person. So if your spouse is killed by medical malpractice, God forbid, you as the spouse, as the partner, the married partner of that person, has a right to do it. And as the child of a parent, you can do it as well. The question becomes more, hazy when it's a sibling, because then the question is, Were they married? Were they legally married but separated? So the cases are the cases can get pretty complicated in situations like that, but honestly, that's more of a reason to call a lawyer. So if you have your basic information together or you just have some questions, getting a consultation from a medical malpractice lawyer in Chicago is a really good idea. And here's the good news. You know a guy who can give you a free consultation, this guy right here. So if you have questions and you want to have a case screened, or even if you just are curious about a circumstance that you and your family are going through, please feel free to give me a call, 312 500 4500. That phone gets picked up day or night, 365 days a year. So you can call me in the middle of the night or early in the morning, whenever you need to. And I always get back to people who call me. So if you have any questions or problems, feel free to give me a call. Thank you for watching the video. I hope this information helps you. Take care.